Welcome to the Inside Scoop, your one-stop shop for cracking the leadership code. Have you ever wondered what those conversations are like in the boardroom? Curious about the secret sauce successful executives possess? On the Inside Scoop podcast, we sit down with successful executives, getting their unique perspective on what it takes to be a good leader. They'll share their hard-won wisdom, the crucial competencies needed to thrive as a leader, and the unexpected lessons learned along the way. Here, we unlock the secrets of the executive suite. We get the inside track directly from the leaders themselves. In each episode, we'll dissect the essential skills needed to go from manager to leader, offering a leader's perspective on the challenges, triumphs, and unexpected wisdom they've acquired. The Inside Scoop, leadership lessons, served fresh.
Today for another episode of the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Eduardo Bryant. Today, we're going to be covering an area that is often missed, and that is interviewing. It's one of those important things that fall within the wheelhouse of just about every manager. We're going to go deep and dive into what that really means and what it looks like. Our guest is really an expert in this area, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. Now, if you hear things and see things that you can identify with, we encourage you to subscribe, become part of our viewing audience. And as always, we say that when you're going through this, figure out a way that it can help make your life better so that you can do your job a little bit better. So let's go ahead and invite our guest in. This podcast, it's available wherever you get your podcast. We have today with us none other than Noah Ruden. I want to get his title right. He is the global training guru. Okay, I simplified it. He's the VP of sales and training of the orthopedic department. So it's going to be a great conversation, and I think you're going to really enjoy what he has to say. Let's invite him in now. Mr. Noah, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Eduardo.
You know what? It is a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this conversation because the area of interviewing is something that it really gets missed. It falls under the radar. And we talk about it in terms of how important it is. So I'm looking forward to diving into this. But before we get into it, I always like to know, as an executive leader like yourself, what kinds of things are you doing to keep yourself sharp and on top of your game? In other words, what are you reading right now?
Well, because you prepped me for this, I pulled the book I just finished, and I have another book on my countertop I'm about to start. But I just finished a book called Surrounded by Idiots. This is actually by the author and the creator of the DISC profiles that became the Insight Discovery profiles about your red, yellow, green, blue, who you are as personality, and how to identify not only who you are, who you're speaking to, how to handle them, how to address certain situations. And it's actually not about idiots at all. I did like the title, but we use in my company Insights Discovery. We use, my blocks are here, our different colors of our personalities and who we are. And I'm getting ready to deliver a course, an advanced course on this. So I just wanted to read this to get a little more insight on all of that. And I just finished it a couple of days ago, and I picked up The Jolt Effect by Matt Dixon, who also wrote Challenger and Challenger Customer and Challenger Sale. I'm a Challenger aficionado. We've been a Challenger company for 7 years, and I've been delivering it in the master trainer for a long time. So that's his new piece of work, and I just picked it up to give it a read.
All right, good. I like that title. You know, titles that have kind of a catchy edge, a little bit of a punch, it really gravitates and grabs your attention, right? Makes you go, what is this about? I love when you said it's not about idiots, but of course, it will get people's attention.
Yeah. It's startling. When I showed my fiance this, she goes, "That seems like a weird book." I go, "Yeah, it's about personalities. It's not actually about idiots, but it's a good read when it starts talking about again, not just who we are, but the title came from the fact that he was a certain color personality, and he was trying to get a point home to a different type of personality, and this person wasn't understanding the concepts he was delivering. It's because of how they received information was dramatically different than how he liked to deliver it. So he thought they were an idiot because they weren't able to process it. But in reality, it was just two different personalities that weren't getting through. And so that was the basis of the whole book.
That sounds like reality.
Yeah, exactly right.
I mean, can you imagine when you talk about personalities? And that's going to certainly lead us into the whole conversation that we're going to have around interviewing. But before we get into that, you know, People are always interested in how people got to where they are, given the perch with which you sit right now,
Yeah.
being the VP and global training and all the things that you do in the whole orthopedic space. I'm sure that your path was probably not a straight shot. So how did you end up sitting in the seat that you sit today? What was that like? How did you get there?
Yeah, you said it first, and I say this to a lot of people that I work with in my current role, either directly or just in coaching. My path was non-linear, and I think that's really important for a lot of people to allow themselves to get out of their comfort zone, try different things to become more well-rounded, to allow you to, elevate your scope, your scale, and your influence. I was fortunate. You can kind of see behind me. I was a collegiate athlete. I played hockey in the University of Michigan. After leaving school, I had a lot of former teammates and friends who were in the medical device space. I didn't really know much about it, but they got me introduced to it. So at first, it was being nonlinear because I didn't know what the heck med device was. I didn't know what it even meant. My first day interviewing and getting a job, I was in the operating room. I couldn't wrap my head around that aspect of it. So it's allowing yourself kind of be open to not these traditional maybe jobs and opportunities. And then once I got into medical devices, again, a nonlinear path of allowing myself to move and develop. I went from Chicago to Michigan in different roles. I went from sports medicine to spine and hardware. I then moved, like I said, back to Ann Arbor. Then I was taking different roles. I was offered around 7 years ago to get into sales training. I always loved training and development. I had associates underneath me, but I had to move to San Diego to take a different role and move in house. I allowed myself to do that. And there's this understanding that you can't always be uncomfortable, but if you truly want to develop, you need to put yourself in uncomfortable situations and allow yourself to raise your hand for something new. And as I took new roles and different areas with different people, you build these experiences that allowed myself to share the experience with others. And so as I continue to look at other roles in my development, became the director of global sales training for NuVasive, and then moved into a sales leadership development role, and then up to VP. And it was only really because, candidly, with my boss, my breadth of experience and having a whole lot of different experiences made me the best candidate in his mind to handle a large role like this, where there's a lot of different people you have to deal with, a lot of different departments, global, right? So many different countries and markets. So I think for everyone is just being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and trying to be as non-linear as you can to gain as much experience as you can.
So when you talk about being uncomfortable in order to be comfortable, break that down a little bit. Are you referring to moving from Michigan to different places like San Diego? What types of things are you suggesting go into that? So for the person listening and they're thinking,
Yeah.
how do I get uncomfortable to be comfortable?
First of all, raise your hand. Raise your hand. When people ask for support, help, raise your hand. It doesn't need to be a physical move, Eduardo. I think that comes up a lot, especially, it's physically moving is uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be that, but it was not always knowing the answer and knowing I was going to go into departments where I didn't know what the answer was going to be. And I was going to get asked questions that were going to make me uncomfortable because I didn't know, I don't have a response, and getting comfortable with that vulnerability of saying, I don't know, but I'll find out. I'll give an example. My first day as the director of global sales training 7 years ago for NuVasive, my boss, I reported into HR, which is already new. I was in sales my whole life. To report into HR is dramatically different. And my boss, this was a CHRO. He was a chief HR officer, and he was an L&D specialist. That's what he actually did in school. His first ask for me was to start looking at new LMSs. And I'm not kidding you, Eduardo. I had to ask him, I go, I don't know what LMS stands for. And it's something as basic as that, where if you give me anything in the field and sales, clinical of what I was doing, I knew the answer, I knew how to find it, or I knew what they were talking about. And I did that for around a decade or so. And as soon as I moved in-house, I started getting asked questions and asked to do things that I had never been asked before. And that's uncomfortable. But that was how you grow, because now looking back in my current role, we're reevaluating LMSs again. And I went through that process. And I know all these players and what to ask and what to look for and what things I stumbled over the first time going through because I didn't know what the heck I was looking for. But now I'm in a better position to truly analyze what matters to us, what we're trying to use, our objectives. And that's something I developed because I allowed myself to be uncomfortable early on with not knowing what the heck I was doing.
So that uncomfortableness obviously allowed you to ask the question, what is an LMS? How many people, I wonder, would have been so afraid to look, I'm going to use the word like an idiot, in front of their boss by not knowing what an LMS is, that they would have probably gone and looked it up themselves, Googled it, asked a friend, and then tried to figure out how to do it without doing what you did and just simply said, what the heck is this? And then from there, allowed yourself to say, okay, I don't know anything about it, but I can do it, and to actually go tackle that.
And surround myself with people that help me. Once I knew what it was and what the ask was, my coworkers call me a skeptic. I'm not always a skeptic, but I ask a lot of questions. I'm big on defining things, clarifying things, making sure that, hey, we're acting efficiently, acting the right way, because people don't ask questions. You do a whole lot of work and realize it wasn't even remotely close to what the objectives were. So I'm a big question asker. And when you do that too, you know whom the right people are that you need on your side to get it done properly. So once I asked a bunch of questions around what the LMS was and uncomfortability, then you're able to bring in the people who are probably experts in it to really help you execute on that. But if you're trying to do it on your own, if you're not asking the questions, if you're not okay being uncomfortable, then you really don't know what the ask is and who to help you out, and you just get more and more frustrated. So I'm not afraid to ask those questions, and people let me know that.
You know what? And we're talking about what an LMS is and how to find one, build one, put one together, launch one. But it could apply to anything. It doesn't have to be that. It's the old saying, you don't know what you don't know. And the only way to find out that is to really ask those questions. And there's a whole aura about asking questions, how to ask the questions. And we can get into some of that as we delve into the whole interviewing thing. Because interviewing, is it not all about asking questions? It's about how you ask a question, and then it's about how the answer is given. It's not always the answer, but it's the way the answer is actually delivered to you. And that can speak volumes to the people that you're hiring, because you're trying to build a bench. You're trying to put people in position. So what I want to do is I want to stick our toe into this whole space about interviewing, because and I know that just about every single company out there, they all put in their mission statement that our most important resource are our employees. Everybody can finish the sentence on that. So given that, that's quite a big responsibility for a person that sits in a position where they have to hire and bring in new talent into the organization. So I want to start with an area that I think is really missed, and that is interviewing someone not for the position that's open, but interviewing them, recognizing the skill set for the position above that, even though that position is not open, but trying to see if that person can actually do it. In that scenario, are you interviewing people and your team interviewing people for the next level, or are they just hyper-focused on the opening?
Yeah, we use a very simple saying in the courses I deliver and for my team is we hire for talent, not for skills. And I think that's kind of what you're getting to is, I don't know if they have the specific skill set to do this exact job or not, but you can teach skills. You can't teach talent. And so we always want to make sure we're hiring the right people, talented people that we want on our teams, and we can develop the rest and let them move up. But if you're hiring for a specific skill set only and something that fits a little mold, we've found more times than not, those people don't work out, they don't grow within the company, or they just struggle because they don't have the talent, they just have a specific skill set. So quick example, like when I was in Spine Hardware as a sales trainer or the director of global sales training, I had to hire a new sales trainer, and we hired someone without any spine background. And my boss really pushed back against me hiring this person. I pushed hard to hire her because I said, this person is uber talented. I can teach them spine. We can teach them spine hardware. This person has so much talent and work ethic and drive. I want them on our team and integrity. And she ended up not only being an amazing asset on my team. When I left and went to Smith and Nephew, she was promoted by my former boss to my role. That's how good she was at her job by the time she was done. And, it doesn't happen for everybody. But I'm a firm believer that I don't really look at their skill set necessarily. I look at, are they talented? Can I put them in place? We'll give them the resources to build those skills.
Okay. I'm real big on making sure things are crystal clear. So for a new manager that's coming out and they're hearing this and they're saying to themselves, okay, I get that. I get that. You want to hire talent. You don't just want to hire the skills. I understand that. Let's break that down. Let's get granular on that so that everybody is real clear on what you are defining as skill, as well as defining as talent, so that as a new manager or even a seasoned manager that may be thinking, I haven't been doing that, but this sounds like a great concept that maybe I should start doing. Let's make that picture real clear for them.
Yeah. So the simple of it, and I'll go into tactics that we teach and we do. The simple is the skills are the physical trade, right? Do they have it? Do they not? Spine hardware. Have they done it? Have they not? Sales, right? That's the skill. Have they done it? The talents are the more intangibles that we all talk about, right? Work ethic, team fit, different integrity, whatever it is. Those are kind of like the soft skills are talents, if you want to say, and the hard skills of the trades are the skill side. What we do and what I teach is for our managers, and we'll go into this about effective interviewing and on both sides. I don't know what that looks like for every individual manager. I'm not going to tell you, here's the talent you need to hire for, here's a skill you need to have. You're creating your own team. You're creating your own culture. You're creating what you want your identity to be as a department. That's up to you. That's why you're the people leader. That's why you're in role. What I want you to do is quantify that. What are 5 or 10 things that you want to make sure this person has? Rate them. Maybe for them, skill is important because they're going into a clinical role and they do have to have some level of clinical need. So that's something I do want to make sure. It's my 4th important thing. My most important is teamwork. So I want to figure out, on interviewing how good they are at teamwork and they worked in teams. And then it's X and it's Y. And I have my people write out those 5 or 10 things that are really important to them. Put them in order. And as you're interviewing, rate 1 through 5, 1 through 10, whatever your system is, how the interviewee did in each of those categories that matter to you. And hopefully at the end of it, you can look and compare and say, okay, this person had great skills, but they were way low on teamwork. They only had individual contributor roles. They never worked on a team, way low on integrity. They talked about ways that they kind of just got the job done, but not. And now we see the talent we wanted probably wasn't there, but the skills were, and do you want to hire that person? That's up to you. But we like to quantify it, write it down, understand what matters to you as an interviewer, and then compare.
Now, that's once the person is sitting in front of you, and obviously you're conducting the interview. But let's back it up a little bit. Let's go to before the person is sitting in front of you. Who is it that finds this talent? Is it you? Is it your team? Or do you work with, let's say, a recruiting company? If you do work with a recruiting firm, now they've got to be able to take your concept and do it. I can hear you saying, because you understand where I'm going with this. Or is it an AI system where there's artificial intelligence that's now screening candidates? This is way before Noah, they're sitting in the chair across the table from you. Sourcing that is also a vital part of this whole interviewing process because we have to be able to see certain things. And I can tell you from experience that one of the number one things that is looked for is that skill. If you don't have spine work or orthopedic background, you don't even get to the place where they're sitting in front of you.
Yeah, it's a great point. On one side, as a people leader, you always have your own mental bench, right? Everyone you meet, Eduardo, we met, everybody you meet, you always think of, could I bring them into my organization? Where might they fit? I've been in this industry for 17 years, right? You have lived in 5 states doing it. There's a lot of people who just have an internal bench. So when roles open up, things happen. You're like, I want to reach out to this person. I want to talk to this. When it is a more formal setting and you have to open a rec on LinkedIn or whatever it is in a formal, any of it, for us, we have internal people from talent acquisition. Some people outsource it, but there's usually a recruiter at some point in the piece. Eduardo, your point is really strong. That one thing that I made, and it wasn't even a negotiable. Any rec for my team that I opened up, before I opened it up, whoever the recruiter is going to be assigned to it sat in my office, and I pounded home to them what was important to me. So when they did phone screens, when they looked at resumes, they would ask me all the questions. What am I looking for? I'd give them really generally loose parameters on the skills, the resume side, but I would give them strict parameters around their screening, whatever they do when they do reach out or connect to them, so that they knew exactly what I was looking for, what the role was we were trying to fill, what type of person I wanted on my team. So by the time it did get to me, hopefully we got a better group of candidates. My managers and myself, when I didn't have that strong relationship with the talent acquisition person, where they didn't know what I was really looking for, yeah, we got a bunch of awful candidates, or just candidates that, not even bad candidates, it's not their fault, didn't fit at all what I was looking for. And it extended a process that can be exhaustive. So we always sat down ASAP, and I talked to my talent acquisition team about everything I wanted. I said, you can interview the hell out of me for as long as you need to make sure that you feel comfortable going back to your desk. You know what I'm looking for.
You know, I think that should be interviewing 101. I really do, because we're all so busy anymore that we just don't have time to, make the phone calls and do all the phone screens. That's why we hire firms to actually do that. And all too often, in trying to get those people to say, hey, what is it that you're looking for? That's a challenge, because let's face it, everybody brings their own individual backgrounds into it. You pick a recruiter that's been recruiting for many companies. This is how they do it. They're used to doing it. I got this. Don't worry, Noah. I know exactly what you need in this industry. And they will hire pretty much what they've done before. So that's a good
point. Like I said, I'm a skeptic. So unfortunately for them, that conversation doesn't fly with me. And we're going to still have it. I'm going to ask a lot of questions in terms of how come they think they know what I'm looking for and what to hire. It should be standard practice. I agree. And what we're probably going to talk about in the next few questions, I'm assuming, is unfortunately, a lot of managers don't have a standard practice. They don't have anything like that. And it is always a little bit of like, oh, it's a feel, it's an art, I just kind of know. And then it becomes really hard to reproduce and replicate what worked well. And we really struggle as people leaders and as humans in general defining things. And if we don't define it, it becomes hard to execute against it. And so a lot of times you say, yeah, no, I know what I'm looking for. But if you sit down and say, okay, define that for me, they struggle. And so this is why I like having what we talked about, the talents and the skills that you're looking for, why I like having conversations, because you might assume that you know what you're looking for, and they might, but until you articulate it and ask those questions, actually put it down, you'd be surprised how many times you're not really sure. And then you wonder why you miss a lot. It's because there's just nothing prescriptive that you're following.
Good point. Would you say that it would be critically important, and I'm going to assume the answer to this question is yes, that the interviewing process is not just when they're sitting in front of you. That whole interviewing process is, how did they respond to the recruiter that reached out to them? Should you be using recruiters? What kind of questions did they ask the recruiter? I would assume that you would advocate going back to the recruiter and saying, what was that like? What was their process? How soon did they get the resume? Did they provide this? Did they provide that? Was there a 30, 60, 90-day business plan? Did they give you a thank you letter? Did they give you a follow-up? All the types of things that I'm going to assume would be critical to looking at the totality of a person, not just the person sitting in front of you for the hour that they are.
Yeah, I mean, you should always have your feedback loop. Anyone who touches a candidate in any part of the process, there should be a very thorough feedback loop of what was the experience like, all those things. I'm not going to get into what matters to you. Like if I'm hiring for an entry-level position, I don't need a 30, 60, 90. I'm not going to expect that from people. But again, it's having that conversation with your recruiter, whomever it is, here's what the expectations are. And that feedback loop is critically important. I was very thorough with my team currently and my previous teams. We would always sit down and discuss as a team what the experience was like, what was good, bad, and different, how you received them, how they received you, the communicate, whatever mattered to us. Yeah, you need that feedback loop. And to your point, don't assume anything, because there's a lot of people who don't have a feedback loop when it comes to interviewing. They interview people, they have people on their panel, and then I've done this. I've been on panel interviews, as you have, thousands of times. And I'll have people where I interview them, and the person who's the hiring manager never reaches out to me for the feedback. And it blows my mind. They wanted some notes and things like that, but they didn't actually want to reach out and say, what was the experience like? What was your feedback on this person? And it's just not a part of their process. And it doesn't make sense to me, but that's part of the miss, I think, with a lot of hiring managers.
Yeah. And you know what? I would agree with you totally. I want to talk about panel interviewing in a moment. But before I get there, I want to bring into this conversation the whole aspect of asking questions. You
Yeah.
know, an interview really centers around what questions are going to be asked. What is
Yeah.
the interviewer, the interviewee going to say? In fact, recruiters will often prep a candidate and say, okay, here's the type of stuff that they like to
Yeah.
ask. And then a lot of companies will have a standardized type of questions. They feel that, hey, you know, if we ask the same question to every candidate, then we can kind of base them equal. Others are like, no, 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 we'll just go all over the map. I'm sure it's just a preference and maybe even be a company standard. What are your thoughts around how that whole process is most beneficial?
Yeah, we have those, and I think they're beneficial, especially for young managers to learn what types of questions to ask those interview guides because they sometimes just don't even know where to begin. I think after you've done them a lot, you kind of get the gist of it, and you might not need that structure or that support from those pieces. I'm going to say three things. One, all of this goes back to from the hiring side and from the interviewee side is prep. There is not enough prep being done, prep work, whether it is preparing questions, whether it's preparing, all these people don't prep enough. They just don't prep enough at all. And it becomes a huge miss on both sides. So one, preparation, preparing those questions. The biggest thing for me when I'm asking questions are hows and whats, not whys. I try to avoid why questions. Whys are interrogations, hows and whats are investigations. I'm interviewing. I want to investigate who this person is, what they did. I don't want them to be defensive in all these pieces. I want to truly understand what's going on. And I would say the biggest thing for me when you ask a question and shut that up. Too many times as an interviewer, we ask questions and then we keep going. We answer the question for them. We don't give them an opportunity to speak. Ask a question, stop talking, and actively listen. Actively listen. I think part of the problem when we have all these, some of the interview guys are like 15 questions is you're literally just trying to get through your questions. Ask a question that's important to you, shut up, and listen actively to the answer. It'll lead you to new questions. It'll lead you to maybe inconsistencies. It'll lead you to follow up or drill downs that really matter to you to figure out who this person is. So not only is asking the questions really important, actively listening to the answers so you can give specific follow-up questions is a huge miss with a lot of my interviewers.
So you said something that made me think of something. And there's two areas I want to go into, and we're still headed toward the panel interview. So hold tight on that one. Here's the first one. You said prepping. Now, think about this, and I've heard this before, that when you prep a candidate so well, then you're getting a canned speech, not authentic and not coming from the heart. Also reduces it doesn't show their ability, I should say, to think on their feet because they've rehearsed it. So that first part of it is, should we prep to that degree? And if we do, are we not robbing ourselves of the ability to really see if this person has the ability to think on their feet? And before you answer that, I'll use this podcast that you and I are doing right now, Noah. You and I chatted a little bit before, but this is a conversation. I'm thinking of questions as you're providing information, and you're doing a marvelous job of how you're walking through that. I didn't give you a list of 15 questions and said, Noah, I'm going to ask you all of these so you can sound real smooth when you deliver it. You are thinking on your feet. You're skilled. An interviewee who has been prepped to that degree is going to not give you maybe an off-the-cuff answer, but a more rehearsed one. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Well, if you have specific, we do this for higher level positions where we'll give an actual, they do this in legal depositions too. We'll give them 5 or 6 questions. We just want them to answer because these are standard. I want to know different things. So we don't have to go through it in the interview. So it is more authentic of a conversation. We'll have some of those answers done. But honestly, Eduardo, I would say, first of all, I don't think you can ever prep too much. You just can't. You can't. Where what you're saying comes into play is not the interviewee's fault, it's the interviewer's fault. If they aren't actively listening and asking targeted questions, follow-up questions, drill down, and you're just going through the list, and yeah, you're right, it's pointless, right? You can fill this out and put an email, I'll delete it later. If you want to actually interview someone, it's on the interviewer to ask those dynamic questions. It's on you to listen for their answers and has follow-ups that matter where they have to think on their feet, to give examples, to pivot from something they said. So I don't think it's a problem if someone's over-prepared as an interviewee. But as an interviewer, it's your job to make sure you're not just going through that list one by one.
All right, good. Okay, so that's the side of the fence you're on with that. I like it. I like that. And I think it's always good to be prepared and prepped as well. But
it is, but again, our interviewers don't do a good enough job of being skeptics and asking drill down questions. And it can become a pretty boring rote process where you don't know much about the interviewee. But that's the interviewer's problem.
I think that's a good segue into what I've been telling you I want to get to, which is that whole panel interviewing, because we do. I've been on a number of panel interviews, and certainly I'm sure you've done your fair share of them as well. And that's where not asking the follow-up questions, I think, comes into play. So let me paint the scenario for you there, Noah. You've got a panel interview. You got, say, 7 people sitting around. Maybe a lot, but you've got 7.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their list of questions that they want to ask, and they're fired up about it. So the poor candidate's sitting there, and then you go first, Noah. So you ask your question, and then you get what I would say is a satisfactory answer. Yeah, not real deep, but nowhere in there it says you get to ask 3 questions because I'm next. So you got your chance, and you've asked your question. What do you think I'm going to do? Am I going to be actively listening and abandon my question to ask a follow-up to your question because we're trying to source the right talent to come into the organization? Or am I most likely going to ask my question and let the answer to your question just kind of float out there like it is?
Well, I would say in experience, the second is what does happen more often than not. And I would say if I ever heard of a teammate of mine or someone I work with have a 7-person panel interview, I would rail against that as a practice. And I would be very comfortable being uncomfortable, having an uncomfortable conversation, but I disagree fully with their interview process. And I'd let them know how come. And for the points that you just said, I'd point out exact reasons why I felt that wasn't the most productive or effective way. I understand why you have panel interviews. One, efficiencies, right? It's hard to get executives and high-level people to spend time. So getting them in one meeting is just an efficient way to get through it. I get some interview or hiring managers are just mean people, and they want to make the interviewee sweat and be in a really difficult position with people they don't know, and they want to see how they react. I'm not a nice person, but I think I'm nicer than that. I don't want to make them, if they're going to be my employee, I don't want them to think that we're like awful human beings, but I want them to be excited and comfortable. The panel interviews that I've been in the most have been usually 2 people, sometimes 3. But it'll go back to what we just said around 10 minutes ago. Even if there are 7, which again, I really can't imagine me being in a place where that is the case. The panel interviewers have to prep as well. I would always, if I'm in a 2-person or 3-person panel interview, I would call the other people that I'm with. If I know I'm panel interviewing with Lindsay and Rod, I call Lindsay and Rod and say, what type of questions do you want to ask? What's our cadence going to be? Who's going to start? How are we going to know if you want to follow up so I don't step on top of you? How are we making sure that this is effective? Because we need to make sure we're hiring the right people. And so it's, again, prep for the interviewer that we are working together to make sure that we can execute a proper interview and know how that panel is going to go so it can go as smooth as possible. And I promise you that probably happens 5% of the time for panel interviews. They all just get on a call and just start talking. And to your point, no one has follow-ups. They're talking over each other. It ends up being really unproductive more times than not. And it's not ideal to have that many people, but if you prep beforehand about how it's going to go, I bet you can get a lot more out of it.
I totally agree. And I'm so glad to hear you say that probably happens about 5% of the time. We don't know for sure, but I think that's probably a pretty good guess. I just think people get called in. I've done it 100 times. I'm sure you have too, where they just bring people in, whether you're in the office or it's a Zoom call, everybody just kind of jumps on.
Yeah.
See now, and see, that's the issue right there. So think about it. Best case scenario is do what you just said. Have a prep session. What do you want to ask? What type of questions? What are your follow-up? What are you looking to get an answer from?
Yeah.
What does that look like? And then give the space to a person. By the way, I have been on a 7-panel interviewing more than once. So just for kicks. But
you can't tell I'm fundamentally against that.
But no, I am too. But here's why. You've got different departments, and the candidate that's sitting there, if they're going to touch different departments, then there's a thinking that they want to bring in someone from each one of those departments or most of them so that person can have an opportunity to say, hey, this person's going to affect my department as well. So that's why I'm going to be in on this interview. I've had it happen more than once. But
I guess
like you said,
I understand the efficiencies. I just disagree with with what you're getting out of it.
well, that's why we're having the discussion to help people who are in that position of
Yeah.
leadership where they're filling recs. They're trying to fill the bench, right? You got to get the right candidate in there. And it's just a matter of being able to say, how do I do this? And so to your point, if in fact the panel group can get together before and say, hey, how do you want to do this? Ask those types of questions that's going to lead you somewhere. What are your thoughts around all of the scenario questions that people want you to answer using the STAR method?
Yeah, we use the star method here, and I like having structure. We use the GROW methodology for coaching and star method because it gives you at least checkpoints to make sure you're getting through a certain process, but hopefully allow some flexibility within it for your own personality, your own questions to come out. In general, I'm big on, I don't like scenarios in the sense of I don't give hypotheticals. I hate hypotheticals. I know you talk about your training simulations. We don't do role plays anymore. We do real life simulations of things that are happening because I just hypotheticals are so easy to lie, to manipulate, to go weird places. So I'm big on, diving into actual experiences, actual, simulations, if you will, things that they've done, not scenarios like, okay, no offense to what we talked about beforehand. I wouldn't like this scenario if I'm interviewing someone saying, okay, you're in a plane crash, you have 15 things. That's a made up situation. I'd rather dive into actual experiences that they had. Again, teamwork. Okay, you mentioned you have a panel of 7 people because they're going to be working with 7 departments. My question would be around, tell me an exact situation where you had to work with multiple departments to get a project across the line.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear from them. Let's get actual experiences, and then you dive deeper into it. Whatever they're telling you, that's when you listen and you have those follow-up questions. The STAR methodology, I like it because it kind of goes through that and it gives you a pattern. But I think too many times if we just stick to that, you don't actively listen, you just go to the next step. Got to actively listen and keep driving down to those scenarios and those real life situations.
Okay. I like that. And I think we all use the STAR method and certainly have used it. Are there some certain questions that you favor, like, versus maybe even ones that you don't like?
Yeah. I do like the question around the book. I tend to, usually it's one of my last questions about what book are you reading or what was the last book you read or things like that. I definitely like that. It spurs a lot of cool conversation when you understand what types of things they like and listen to. And quite frankly, to your point, most of our upper level leaders are lifelong learners. And you just want to know, are they actively engaged in that part of it or not? And so it's a cool question. One of my first questions I always start out with is, usually and this will be a very specific question, but usually I'm involved in some sort of leadership interview, whether being a first-time leader or a leader of leaders like I am somehow. And my first question is, how come you want to be in leadership?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I want to listen to their answer, because a lot of times you'll hear, especially younger people who maybe aren't prepped, or they either don't know the answer reality, or it's a climber type answer. Well, it's what's next in my career. And that's not the reason to be a people leader. And so I really want to hear how come they want to be in leadership. Again, that's hyper specific because of most of the interviews I'm in. But whatever the job is, I usually say, how come this job?
Do you put equal weight on the answer to your questions as to the way the question is answered?
As the way it's answered. Dive into that more. What do you mean?
Certainly. So it's not so much what you say, it's how you say it that makes it.
We know that 93% of communication is nonverbal, right? It's not the actual content, it's the inflection, it's the body tone, all those things. So you're hopefully taking all of that in. I put weight though in the genuineness of the answer.
But see, Noah, we know that. And we understand that most communication is nonverbal and the tone and
Yeah.
elocution. We know that. And that's been around for a while. How do we do that? Knowing that the answers that people are giving is only a small part of true communication, but all that other stuff that we just mentioned is what comes into play. So as a manager, as a leader, and I'm sourcing talent for the organization, I need to know how to do that.
Well, part of it's just experience, right? I mean, you just do enough interviews, you hire the wrong people. Sometimes you hire the right people, and we can talk about OPQs and CPQs and things that you can try to make sure that you're profiling properly so you keep hiring the right people. But, a lot of it's just experience and understanding which questions you should be asking, which ones you shouldn't, which one have worked well, what you're looking for in responses. I've asked that question so many times, not even in true interviews, that I'm well aware of which answers people who have been successful and good teammates give, and which answers people who struggle or lone wolves or climbers answer. But that's just experience, and you can't. I know people hate that. Like, unfortunately, there's not many ways you can do it without being uncomfortable and doing it and messing up and asking these questions to get that development, to build that skill set. So a lot of times it's just you do it enough and and for me, it's the genuineness. Like, when they answer it, you can tell if they're being real or not. And if you can't right away, you'll learn that as you meet more people and talk to more people. But I give this feedback to people all the time. I do a whole lot of presentation skills and courses like that. They want to know how to do it properly, how to do this. I go, hey, I get to tell you all the steps and important pieces, but ultimately be yourself, be genuine. Because if you're not, they're going to know, and everything you say, it just belittles the words you said. So, yeah. I don't know if that truly answers the question, but that's how I would look at it.
Oh, no, that's good. In fact, this has been great. I've enjoyed this conversation. I've enjoyed digging into this whole interviewing world, because it's something that we don't often talk about, but it's vitally important. So I'm going to give you an opportunity. If there's some things that you'd like to include or add, or things you wanted to say, just as we kind of wrap this part of the podcast up, you're welcome to take this moment to just give us any last parting remarks around this whole interview world.
This is happening on my team right now. My advice to anybody, first-time managers or not, it's not cliche. Who you hire is probably the most important decision you will make as a people leader. We have so many data points around not only just the cost and time around it, but in terms of the type of culture and team you're trying to build. So don't shorten out on the prep it needs. It's such an important decision. Put the effort in, put the energy in, check the boxes, get people prepared, have the conversation so you're having the right person in front of you and hopefully on your team. And if it's not the right person, do your best. I know this is easier said than done, but I've done it. We always feel like we have to get somebody in now, and we'll rush these decisions because we need to fill a head count. We need the people on the team. Our team's overworked. I've had this conversation with my team time and time again. If you sit them down and say, I could hire somebody right now, or you could be overworked for 3 months and we can get the right person in here, which would you prefer? My team every single time says, I'll be overworked for 3 months, get the right person in here. Set that expectation, be upfront with them, but I promise you they will understand you and your decision. Take your time, get the right person in.
You know what, Noah? Thank you. On behalf of the audience, myself, I've learned a few things as well. Great conversation, great time spending with you. I am so glad you were able to impart, I call it wisdom, pearls of wisdom, nuggets. I thank you so much for that, sir. Thank you very much.
And well, I appreciate you having me on and asking me all these great questions. It's always fun to talk about things we've been doing, right? And get to articulate it. So I just appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And thanks for everyone that's taken time to tune in to listen to this episode of the Inside Scoop. Remember, you can find us wherever you find your podcast. And we encourage that if you found some things that were stimulating and you enjoyed it, please subscribe, become part of our viewing audience with us. So thank you very much. And until we get a chance to see you or you see us again, we want to thank everybody for spending the time with us. Bye for now.
For more exclusive leadership insights, be sure to subscribe to the Inside Scoop on YouTube and Spotify. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that share button and spread the word. See you next time on the Inside Scoop.